History usually tells us where kings lived, where battles were fought, where empires rose and fell. It points to castles, cathedrals, and cities that still stand proudly on maps. But history is far quieter about the places that disappeared. Not destroyed in fire or swallowed by dramatic earthquakes, but slowly erased, village by village, life by life, until only the land remembered them. Britain is filled with such places, lost villages that once breathed, laughed, argued, prayed, and dreamed, and then quietly slipped out of existence. If you walk through the British countryside today, you may think you are seeing untouched nature, rolling fields, gentle hills, grazing sheep, narrow rivers bending through grass. But often, beneath your feet, there is something else. Stone foundations hidden under soil, paths worn smooth by generations of bare feet, wells filled in centuries ago, graves without names. Britain's lost villages are not gone in the way we imagine disappearance. They are still here, just silenced. Long before modern Britain took shape, villages were the heart of life. A village was not just a collection of houses, it was survival. It was community. It was identity. Families lived in the same place for centuries, farming the same land, walking the same paths, telling the same stories. Children were born, grew old, and were buried within sight of their homes. The land did not belong to them in the way we think of ownership today. Instead, they belonged to the land. Many of these villages were small, often no more than a few dozen families. Their homes were built from timber, mud, wattle, or local stone. Roofs were thatched. Smoke from hearth fires hung low in the air. Life was hard, repetitive, and fragile, but it was also deeply rooted. People knew every field, every stream, every change in the seasons. They knew when the land was angry and when it was generous. So how does a village vanish? Sometimes the answer was sudden. In the 14th century, the Black Death swept through Britain like a shadow with teeth. Entire communities were wiped out in weeks. Villages where laughter once echoed became places of silence. Fields went unfarmed. Animals wandered untended. In some cases, there were no survivors to bury the dead or rebuild. The land reclaimed what humans had borrowed. Grass grew over doorways. Roofs collapsed. Names were forgotten. But more often, disappearance was slow, quiet, almost polite. One of the most common reasons villages vanished was economic change. After the medieval period, wool became more valuable than people. Landowners realized they could make more money raising sheep than renting land to villagers. Entire communities were evicted, homes were pulled down, churches abandoned. This process was called enclosure, but for those who lived through it, it felt like exile. Imagine being told that the place your family had lived for generations was no longer meant for you. Imagine watching your home dismantled stone by stone. Imagine leaving behind the graves of your parents, knowing you would never return. Many villages did not die, they were pushed. Some of these displaced villagers crowded into growing towns and cities, becoming part of the urban poor. Others drifted, searching for work, losing their village identity along the way. Their old homes were erased so completely that future generations would never know they existed. Climate also played its role. Britain's coastline has always been restless. Villages built near the sea were slowly claimed by erosion. Storm after storm took small pieces at first, fields, then paths, then houses. People rebuilt again and again, until eventually there was nowhere left to stand. Entire villages slid into the North Sea. Bells from drowned churches were said to ring beneath the waves during storms, according to local legend. Whether true or not, such stories speak to grief that never quite faded. Other villages were abandoned when rivers changed course, when marshes spread disease, or when soil became exhausted. A village might shrink slowly as families left one by one until only a handful remained. Eventually, the church would close, the last house would fall, and the village would pass from memory into rumor. There are places in Britain today where only faint signs remain: a slight rise in the ground where a church once stood, a strange curve in a hedge that once followed a street, darker soil marking where homes were built. Archaeologists call these earthworks, but to the careful eye, they are echoes. One such place might look like an ordinary field. Sheep graze lazily, the wind moves through tall grass. But if you stand still, you might notice shallow humps arranged in rows. These were once houses. Children ran between them, fires burned inside them. Now they are barely visible scars on the land. What makes Britain's lost villages so haunting is not just that they disappeared, but that most people never noticed them at all. Roads pass nearby, tourists drive past without knowing, maps show nothing unusual. The land keeps its secrets unless you know how to look. Some lost villages were deliberately erased during war. In the 20th century, entire communities were evacuated to create military training grounds. Families were told to leave temporarily, but many never returned. Houses decayed, churches were used for target practice, fields were torn apart by tanks. The villages became ghosts of modern conflict, casualties of preparation rather than battle. In these places, the pain feels fresher. Photographs exist, names are known. Elderly people still remember the day they were told to pack their lives into suitcases and leave. Their villages are not ancient ruins, they are interrupted lives. Walking through a place like this today can feel unsettling. The silence is heavy, not peaceful. You can sense that the land remembers more than it shows. And then there are the villages that survive only in records. Names written in medieval documents, tax lists, or church registers. No physical trace remains at all. These villages exist only as words on aging paper. Yet each name once meant something. It was spoken daily. It was home. What did it sound like when people greeted each other there? What jokes did they tell? What fears did they carry? We will never know. History rarely records ordinary lives in detail. The loss of these villages is also the loss of countless untold stories. There's a strange irony in how Britain remembers its past. Great monuments are preserved, restored, and celebrated. Lost villages, however, are often left to fade quietly. They do not fit neatly into heroic narratives. They remind us of failure, injustice, disease, and displacement. They show that history is not only about progress, it is also about abandonment. Yet in recent years, interest in lost villages has grown. Archaeologists, historians, and local communities are trying to recover what can still be found. Using aerial photography, ground-penetrating radar, and old maps, they trace the outlines of vanished worlds. Every discovery feels intimate: a shard of pottery, a child's toy, a buckle, a coin, small objects, but heavy with meaning. For descendants of those who were forced to leave, these discoveries matter deeply. They are proof that their ancestors existed, that their lives mattered enough to leave traces behind. Even when villages vanish, people do not disappear entirely. Their bloodlines continue. Their stories, fragmented though they may be, survive in family memory. There is also something profoundly human in the idea that land remembers us even when we forget ourselves. Paths worn into soil do not vanish easily. Field boundaries linger long after fences rot. The earth holds on. When you unlock the secrets of Britain's lost villages, you are not uncovering grand conspiracies or hidden treasure. You are uncovering absence. You are learning how fragile human settlements are in the face of power, profit, nature, and time. You are being reminded that permanence is often an illusion. Standing on a lost village site can change the way you see the landscape forever. Fields stop being empty, hills stop being silent. You begin to imagine lives layered beneath the present. The countryside becomes crowded with invisible neighbors. Perhaps the greatest lesson of Britain's lost villages is this: history does not only happen in famous places, it happens everywhere people live, love, and leave. And sometimes the most important stories are the ones that almost disappeared. These villages may no longer appear on maps, but they remain part of Britain's soul, quiet, hidden, waiting for someone to notice.